Speedrunners in the YouTube comments section have a complicated past. While YouTube's comment section has got a lot more civil in the last decade, speedrun videos have been put under an extra layer of scrutiny from those who are recommended them from the algorithm gods. Claims of cheating, lack of skill, and of course the classic, "I beat this game in 30 minutes when I was 12 years old, but I didn't record it because I didn't think that was anything special." Whether it's claiming that anyone who speedruns will never feel the touch of a woman, or that performing glitches invalidates any speedrun, you're sure to see some smooth-brained vitriol splattered all over the comment section of nearly any somewhat popular speedrunning video on YouTube. More recently, however, the sentiment is shifting as more and more people are coming to the understanding of just what speedrunning is all about. With this shift, tons of people are sharing their stories of how they have done glitches accidentally, or what they perceive to be fast. The problem with this is speedrunners have a sort of scientific proving method for whether or not things can actually happen, or if they do, if they're fast. If you think something is fast, time it. If a glitch happens, figure out how, record it, and make it consistent. Learn the rules for how it works. It's understandable that someone in the YouTube comment section wouldn't understand this process. Because of this, it's generally assumed that what people may say in the comments is simply not true, or that they misunderstand what exactly is happening. Or if they did discover something, what the full implications of that discovery is. That is, usually. Sometimes, just sometimes, people come in clutch and drop a huge discovery on your YouTube video. This is exactly what happened on December 13th, 2021, when Dallin Roach left this comment on Hark the Shark's video, explaining how to do what was the current any percent route for the excavation site. When reading comments like this, it's common to take them with a huge pound of salt, because people who don't have as much experience breaking games for the purpose of speedrunning might look over things that make the tricks inconsistent or not useful. But even so, we always test most everything, as long as it seems somewhat feasible. What Hark was showcasing in this video is what I covered at the end of my last video. Ground pound clipping out of bounds using this deployable cover, then traversing out of bounds past the laser. Then you can clip back in bounds past the laser and just start conservatory without completing the excavation site. As it turns out, Roach here was correct, however. The laser does damage over time and pushes you into an instant kill barrier. But if you save and quit, this barrier disappears. This means that you'll get pushed into the conservatory room and can skip the level entirely, including the boss fight. This by itself saves basically no time over the other setup that we already were doing, but it is a lot easier. All was fine and dandy. A YouTube commenter saves the day by making a trick more consistent and easier. Hooray! That is, until Sasquatch Sensei testing the strat tried to kill himself to do it again. And he couldn't. Clipping through the laser after reloading checkpoint gave him invincibility. This has huge implications for the speedrun, and immediately the community got to work testing things. There are a few holy grails of tricks in speedrunning. Abilities so powerful that if you have even a few of them, then your game's any percent speedrun is going to be hilariously broken. Some of these include the ability to go out of bounds, infinite ammo, wrong warps, no clip, and of course, invincibility. At this point, Halo Infinite has 3 of these 5, and the way things are going, it might not be too long before we get even more tricks that absolutely blow this game apart. Of all the possible things that could have been found, however, invincibility turns out probably to be the best possible one we could have asked for. You see, in Halo Infinite, the world is made up of a bunch of different islands. You start on the one island with the tower, and there are 2 main factors stopping you from going to the other ones. Firstly, there's an elastic barrier. This barrier bounces you off of it and back towards where you came. This is super inconvenient since it's maintained throughout the entire game. Only small holes in it open up above the bridges when you unlock new areas. This stops us from being able to do more optimal fusion coil launches from one island to the other, instead of having to thread the needle through the barriers over the bridge that we unlock. The other barrier is the return to combat timer. In classic Halo fashion, if you go too far out of bounds, the game counts down from 10. And the only thing that can stop it from killing you when it reaches 0 is if you subscribe. This is only if you're able to get somehow past the elastic barriers, however. It had been known that there was a few holes in the barrier, most notably this gap between the mountains that lets you jump right across to the other island. Not very useful when you realize that you can only explore for a total of 10 seconds before you get put in timeout. At the time, there was 15 main mission levels, and none of them could be skipped entirely. There were tons and tons of out-of-bounds skips, but there was literally 0 sequence breaks. The game was made in a way that you couldn't trigger the levels to start any earlier than they're supposed to. This was strange, especially for an open world game. Usually in open world speedruns, you can damn near skip straight to the end. Why do you think Skyrim and Oblivion are so short? In those games, you just need to get to the correct area ahead of time, then the scripts that enable progression can be activated from there, essentially placing you right at the end of the game as if you completed everything before it. In some games, there are checks in place to make sure that this doesn't happen. For example, in Pokemon, the game has an NPC check if you've completed all 8 gym leaders before allowing you to challenge the Elite Four. Or does it? In some Pokemon games, it actually only checks if you've completed the last gym, allowing you to enter the Elite Four with only 1 badge. It's actually really rare for games to properly check stuff like this before allowing you to progress, since it simply shouldn't be necessary. Why bother programming 8 separate checks for every badge when it should only really be possible to get there after collecting the last one? The game and programmers assume that you have to collect the previous 7 before you can get to the 8th. So if you have the 8th, you must have done all 8, and not just the last one. Pokemon aside, one would hope the same rules apply here. For a second, it looked like it might. It was tipped to the speedrunning community that if you clip out of bounds and into the room that you end up in after you beat Conservatory, that the triggers actually function, and you can skip right to the level Spire. It was reported that it had been done successfully, and that there was even an on-screen UI that says the mission started as Spire. After a few hours of testing, however, I was the first one to be able to replicate this trick, and it did work. But not how we hoped it would. Upon clipping back in bounds, you get sucked into a cutscene. Once it's over, it puts you outside and in the level Spire.
That structure.
But the actual Spire is nowhere to be found. This soft locks the save completely, as there is no way to progress if the level doesn't actually spawn. It seems the game checks to see if you actually completed the Conservatory before it loads in the Spire. This would have been the first big sequence break in the game, saving nearly 20 minutes. And while it was cool that someone tipped us off that it exists, it just goes to show that this can happen if things aren't tested properly. Going back to Roach and his invincibility, it turns out that it doesn't only apply to damage from enemies or yourself. It also makes you invincible from world damage. Kill barriers and return to combat timers are turned completely off. And this is where the game starts to really open up. No longer were the runners confined to just the 2 islands with the dig site. Basically, they could explore the entirety of the map as long as they could get past the elastic barriers. There was a few known spots that you could cross, like the mountain, but it needed to be tested extensively. That is, until we realized being in a flying vehicle like a Banshee completely removes all elastic barriers across the entire map. Once invincible, if you managed to get to a Banshee, you could literally fly anywhere on the map with no problems at all. All from the 5th mission. It didn't seem like it was going to be possible to sequence break any of the game at first, at least from what we had seen. That is until Hart got a tip from one of the legendary Halo modders, Zedekins. Oh fuck, I pulled up a fresh save file and modded my way to the road, and suddenly the scripts start popping and the game lets me into the final area. From not even capturing an FOB yet to the end of the game. Speedrunners, please. Once we heard that, it was on. The entire community went ahead and started testing it, and what do you know? This time, it actually worked. You could load up the road and skip right to the House of Reckoning by flying a Banshee all the way there. Upon further testing, it seemed that the rest of the game functions correctly, allowing you to complete the whole game without having actually played nearly half of it. This skip goes from the dig site all the way to the House of Reckoning, skipping 7 whole story missions and saving nearly an entire hour in the 80% speedrun. This skip cuts the speedrun itself in half. In honor of that great commenter who inadvertently found this trick, it is now deemed Roach Skip. After it was proven to be possible, it was the last barrier holding off people from doing actual speedruns. Up until this point, people mostly wanted to spend time on trying to break the game as much as possible before sinking time into doing actual runs. After all, why bother doing runs if you might end up skipping large segments of the game that you're spending time to get good at? But with this new discovery, most are pretty certain that it won't get any more broken than it already is. So it's safe to put some actual time into getting good. That isn't to say that all testing is over though. There are still plenty of optimizations to be found, particularly in finding fast ways to get to the Banshee. Currently, most runners are just walking there, but with the proper setups, Fusion Coil launches could save upwards of 2 minutes on just the traversal to the Banshees alone. I've been working on getting some of them consistent, and this is what I've found so far. If you fast travel as soon as you get Invincibility, you can keep it when you spawn in at Fob Gulf. From here, the goal is to get from this point of the map to over here, so you can cross over to the other island. Then you ask Brohammer to give you a Mongoose while you collect the companion coil. By punching the Mongoose, you can get it to the correct angle, then use it to set up a 45-degree coil launch. For more info on how these work, watch my previous video on the subject. If done correctly, it'll launch you all the way to the top of the mountain, where you can set up for another launch to go across the gap and all the way to Fob Hotel. There are 2 Banshee spawns at Fob Hotel, and they are always there, so doing this launch will get you to them as fast as possible. Once in the Banshee, the barriers are all gone and you can just fly in a straight line to the road. Fortunately, once the road loads in, you can fly to the end of that and enter into the House of Reckoning. While the Invincibility may let you skip nearly half the game, it certainly doesn't trivialize it. The hardest part of the run by far is the coil launches and movement. And with this new route, there are even more tricks like that added in. The Invincibility also doesn't last forever. If you save and quit or load into a new mission, you lose this ability. That means that the last 2 levels, you'll have no Invincibility and no shield upgrades. For Legendary and other categories that don't allow the use of the tank gun, this will make the endgame extremely punishing. There's also a lot of support for the potential no mission skips category, making Halo Infinite the Halo game with the most categories by far. With the emerging any percent no tank gun, no mission skips, 100%, and easy and legendary variants for each, and potentially even a few more. For now, the race is on though. With a consistent and fast any percent route finally solidified, runners are competing to see who can be the first to break the game's biggest barriers. As of writing this, Penguin Sanez has the fastest time at 44 minutes and 49 seconds with loads removed. But I would expect to see the game go as low as 38 minutes in the next few days. Roach Skip embodies everything I love about the speedrunning community. Countless separate communities, everyone from the modding scene to the core speedrunning Discord, and even YouTube comment sections, helping to break the game into absolute pieces. Now that those pieces are apart, it's time to put them back together and do some runs. Please go check out some of these awesome runners doing this run all the time. And if you want to hang out and talk about it, come join the Halo Runs Discord group, or join me live on Twitch. The link's in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and thanks to these awesome people in the Halo Runs community for being so rad. Speaking of rad, these rad people support me on Patreon, and so should you.